Remember when this Hollywood actor almost started an international conflict? Now, his name is Seth Rogen. And you know Seth, right? The guy with the goofy grin who's been acting and producing for a long time. Well, one day, in the late 2000s, Seth and his buddy, Evan Goldberg, were just chilling. They were probably laughing, maybe smoking a little weed, the usual. And, like most creative minds, they started talking about television journalists. They were talking about how journalists always interview dictators, the kind of people who think they're invincible. These guys run countries with fear and power, and the journalists just sit there, asking questions like they're talking to the guy who runs a pizza place. It's like, what's going on here? They're talking to some of the most dangerous men in the world, and yet they don't ask the real questions. It just seemed off. Then Evan, who's Seth's writing and producing partner, threw out a wild idea. He said, what if, during one of those interviews, the journalist just stands up, pulls out a gun, and shoots the dictator, like right there, on television? Seth thought for a second. He laughed and said, that would be insane. I mean, what if that happened? How crazy would that be? And that's when the wheels started turning. You see, Seth and Evan weren't just talking for the fun of it. They both had been in the business for a while, and they knew how to make something out of nothing. So, they started thinking, what if we made a movie about that? It was a ridiculous idea, right? I mean, who makes a movie about a journalist assassinating a dictator live on television? But they were serious about it. They started sketching out a script. It was going to be a comedy, a dark one, about this bumbling journalist who's sent to interview a dictator. And during the interview, he's supposed to kill him. Seth and Evan spent weeks working on the script, throwing in absurd details. The dictator would be this total joke of a man. A guy who claimed he could control the weather, who said he invented the internet, and believed he could talk to dolphins. Ridiculous stuff, all designed to make the dictator seem not just ridiculous, but also dangerously out of touch with reality. It was hilarious. They finished the script, and everything was ready. Well, almost. They thought it would just be another movie. But then, it all started to get real. They sent the script out to a few studios, including Sony. They didn't know what to expect, but when the reply came in, it was a game changer. The email from Sony said something like, "Hey, we love the concept, but we think you should take it further. Why not make the dictator a real person?" Imagine if you made it about someone like Kim Jong-un. That would get people talking. At first, Seth and Evan thought the idea was a bit too much. It was one thing to make fun of a fictional character, but a real dictator? Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, was a very real and dangerous man. But after a few drinks, they came to a decision. Why not? It would make the film even more shocking, more relevant. So they rewrote the script, turning their fictional dictator into Kim Jong-un. They added more over-the-top traits, like his claim that he could play a perfect round of golf, or that he invented the hamburger. Ridiculous, yes, but they thought it would be perfect for this absurd comedy they were creating. Fast forward to 2013. The movie was done. It was called The Interview. Seth was starring in it, along with James Franco, and Randall Park was playing Kim Jong-un. The movie was all set to release. They were excited. It was funny. It was absurd. But then, things started to get a little weird. In 2014, they dropped the trailer. It was funny. It had the usual Seth Rogen. Humor sharp, ridiculous, and a little bit dark. The premise was simple. A CIA mission where a talk show host is sent to North Korea to interview Kim Jong-un and, oh yeah, assassinate him during the interview. Everything in the trailer was designed to be over the top. But as the trailer hit the internet, things started happening. The buzz was massive. People were laughing. Some were even shocked. But what Seth and Evan didn't expect was that North Korea was watching too. And if there's one thing you should know about dictators, it's that they don't like to be made fun of. The bigger they think they are, the harder they fall when you poke fun at them. Here's the thing. Dictators can seem like these powerful figures. But the moment you start making jokes about them, they can flip out and turn into these fragile, petty little children. It's almost like they lose control of their power. And that's exactly what happened when Kim Jong-un saw the trailer for the interview. 2 weeks after the trailer dropped, North Korea fired back. They sent a letter to the UN calling out this American comedy movie. They said that allowing such a film to be made was an act of war. Yeah, you heard that right. An act of war. North Korea was so mad about this movie that they wanted the US to stop the production and distribution of it, or else they'd accuse the US of sponsoring terrorism. But it didn't end there. A few days after that, North Korea's state-run television released a statement threatening stern and merciless retaliation if the movie was released. They were calling it an international incident. They were serious. This wasn't some idle threat. Kim Jong-un was pissed, and he wasn't taking it lightly. This movie wasn't even out yet, and it was already about to cause a huge political disaster. And that's when things really started to get wild. Sony, the studio behind the interview, called Seth and Evan into their offices. The executives sat them down and said, "Look, we love the movie, but North Korea is really upset. They're threatening all sorts of things. You might want to tone down some of the more graphic parts of the movie, especially the death scene where Kim Jong-un's head explodes." Seth and Evan were shocked. They didn't expect to be in the middle of an international incident, but the studio was worried. So, they asked for a few changes. Maybe take down the violence a little, make it less graphic, to try and calm things down. Seth and Evan reluctantly agreed, thinking, maybe this will blow over. But, as it turned out, things didn't blow over. The tension kept building. The North Korean government was still threatening retaliation, and the studio started to get nervous. In December 2014, things took a turn for the worse. Sony Entertainment employees walked into their offices, ready for another normal day of work. But when they went to log into their computers, they were greeted with a creepy red skeleton on the screen and the words, "Hacked by GOP." The Guardians of Peace. They were hackers who had breached Sony's entire network. They had stolen everything: internal emails, private data, employee information, unreleased movies, everything. They didn't just hack for the fun of it, though. No, they were making it clear. They wanted the release of the interview stopped. They wanted it gone. And that's when things got serious. The hackers didn't stop there. They started releasing all the stolen data online. Sony was losing millions of dollars, and the release of the movie was in jeopardy. The hackers didn't just want to leak stuff. They wanted to make sure the interview never saw the light of day. 2 weeks later, the Guardians of Peace struck again. They threatened to launch a terrorist attack on the movie theaters where the interview was set to premiere. They said they would target any theater showing the film. It was real now. It wasn't just a hack, it was a full-blown terrorist threat. And suddenly, Seth, Evan, and everyone else involved were forced to cancel their press tours. They had to hire personal security because the threats were so serious. Sony pulled all television advertisements for the movie. Major theater chains started pulling the movie from their schedules. It was chaos. And finally, Sony had no choice. They had to cancel the wide release of the movie. This movie, that Seth and Evan had worked on for so long, was now hanging in the balance. But then, the President of the United States stepped in. In a press conference, he said, "I understand why Sony pulled the movie, but we can't let some dictator control what's shown in our theaters. This is about freedom of expression." And just like that, the momentum shifted. Sony reversed their decision. They decided to release the movie in a limited number of independent theaters in the US. And in the UK, it got a full release. And that's how Seth and Evan's comedy became a symbol of free speech. The hackers didn't do anything else. No one got hurt. No one died. Kim Jong-un went back to his life, still thinking he was invincible, but without an anus. And that, my friends, is the story of how a joke between two friends almost started an international conflict.